What do you call cheese that isn't yours? Nacho cheese. But seriously, have you ever wondered why your nachos are covered in bright yellow cheese? It's not because the cows ate too many bananas. In this video, we're revealing the colorful secrets of cheese making. You'll discover why some cheeses are dyed yellow, how they get those big holes, and other surprising facts about your favorite snack. Get ready for some cheesy revelations. No pun intended. Ever wonder why some milk makes better cheese? Let's take a peek inside the dairy farm and find out. Cheesemakers are super picky about their milk, and there's a good reason for that. Most cheese farms are far from cities because the cleaner air and water lead to healthier cows and better milk. It's all about creating the perfect environment for top-notch cheese. Now let's talk about what these cows eat. Their diet is crucial for milk quality. Farmers carefully plan the feed, mixing grass and hay with special grains and sometimes even herbs. It's like creating a gourmet meal plan for cows. When the milk arrives at the cheese factory, it goes through a thorough testing process. The cheesemakers are like milk detectives, searching for the perfect balance of protein and fat. They're looking for cheese-making friendly milk with just the right composition. So what makes milk cheese-friendly? It's all about balance. The ideal cheese milk usually has about 3.6% to 3.8% fat and 3.2% to 3.4% protein. This balance helps the cheese form properly and gives it that amazing taste and texture we all love. But here's the cool part. Different milk compositions can create different cheese varieties. More fat might make a creamier cheese, while higher protein could result in a firmer texture. It's like choosing ingredients for a fancy recipe. Each component plays a crucial role in the final product. Cheesemakers use all sorts of fancy equipment to test the milk. There are machines that can tell exactly how much fat and protein is in each batch. They even check for things like bacteria levels and freshness. But some cheesemakers still use old-school methods too, like tasting or smelling the milk. It's like they have super senses. The milk also needs to have the right kinds of bacteria. Don't worry, these are good bacteria that help turn the milk into cheese and give it flavor. Without them, your cheese would be pretty boring. Once they have the perfect milk, the real magic begins. The cheesemakers add special cultures and enzymes that start the transformation process. It's like watching a science experiment unfold, but way tastier. So next time you bite into a delicious piece of cheese, remember all the care that went into selecting the perfect milk. It's not just about the cheese-making process. It all starts with choosing the right ingredients, just like a master chef crafting a gourmet dish. Let's dive into the fascinating world of cheese making. We'll see how those master craftsmen turn liquid milk into solid gold, or should I say, solid cheese. First up, pasteurization. This process gives the milk a thorough cleaning, zapping away harmful bacteria. But here's where it gets interesting. After this deep clean, cheesemakers add specific good bacteria back in. These little guys are the real MVPs of cheesemaking. Now take a look at those massive vats. They're huge. Each one can hold up to 6,000 tons of milk. The cheesemakers heat this milk to exactly 89.6 degrees Fahrenheit. Why so precise? It's the perfect temperature for our bacterial buddies to get to work, changing the milk's taste and texture. Next comes the real game changer, rennet. This enzyme is like nature's own cheese starter kit. It causes the milk proteins to stick together, turning liquid milk into a wobbly gel. It's pretty cool to watch. One minute you've got milk, the next it's all jiggly. As the rennet works its magic, the milk slowly transforms into a custard-like substance called curd. The liquid left behind is whey. The cheesemakers keep a close eye on this process, looking for the perfect moment when the curd is firm enough. Once the curd is ready, it's cut into tiny pieces. This helps separate more whey from the curd. Meanwhile, those hard-working bacteria are still at it, munching away on milk sugars and producing lactic acid. This is what gives cheese its tangy flavor. The curd gets heated again, this time to about 100 degrees Fahrenheit. This extra warmth helps release even more whey and makes the curd firmer. It's like the curd is doing a cheese workout. After stirring and draining off most of the whey, we're left with a big pile of curds. Now it's time for salting. This isn't just for flavor. Salt helps draw out more moisture and acts as a preservative. The final step is pressing the curds. This is where the cheese really takes shape. The curds are packed into molds and put under pressure, squeezing out the last bits of whey and forming a solid block of cheese. And there you have it. We've turned liquid milk into solid cheese. But this is just the beginning. Next, it's off to age and develop even more flavor. The cheese adventure continues. Remember Little Miss Muffet? We're about to see her snack in action, but don't worry, there are no spiders here, just giant vats of soon-to-be cheese. Let's take a closer look at how cheesemakers slice their way to perfection. Check out that huge vat filled with what looks like a giant pudding. This is our milk after it's been transformed into a gel-like substance. Now it's time for the Great Divide. Look at those massive cutters descending into the vat. They're about to perform some cheese surgery. These cutters create a perfect grid pattern as they slice through the gel. It's like watching a sculptor carefully carve their masterpiece. But instead of stone, we're dealing with future cheese. As the cutters move, you start to see something interesting happening. The solid gel is separating into chunks, and liquid is appearing between them. Those solid chunks are called curds, and the liquid is whey. The way these curds are cut is super important. It can make or break the cheese. Smaller cuts create a drier, harder cheese, while larger cuts result in a moister, softer cheese. If you stop cutting early, you could end up with cottage cheese instead. Now it's time for the curds to take a little journey. See those pipelines? The curds are sent through them to rotating drums. These drums are like fairground rides for cheese. They spin around, making sure the curds are evenly distributed. Look at how the curds fall into those cylindrical molds. It's like watching cheese rain. These molds will help give the cheese its final shape. But don't think we're done yet. There's still a lot more to do before this becomes the cheese you'd find in your local store. While the curds are getting comfortable in their molds, the whey is being drained away. It's collected and used for all sorts of things like protein supplements, animal feed, and even some foods. So there you have it. We've seen how a big vat of milk jelly turns into solid curds and liquid whey. It's pretty amazing how a few cuts can make such a big difference. But our cheese journey is far from over. Those curds still need to be pressed, aged, and maybe even flavored before they become the cheese we know and love. Think cheese making is all about stirring and waiting? There's more to it. Let's dive into the pressing process, where those soft, squishy curds transform into firm, sliceable cheese. Watch the workers stack filled molds and bring over the cheese press. This machine is about to put some serious pressure on our curds, like a giant gym where cheese goes to get buff. The pressing process can last up to 12 hours. That's half a day of constant pressure. During pressing, more whey is squeezed out of the curds. It's like wringing out a wet sponge, but on a much bigger scale. As the whey drips away, the cheese takes on its final shape and texture. You can actually see it getting firmer right before your eyes. Cheesemakers apply different pressure levels for various cheese types. Hard cheeses like Parmesan get squeezed intensely, while softer cheeses like Brie receive a gentler touch. It's similar to how extreme pressure forms diamonds from carbon atoms over time. In our case, we're creating delicious cheese. Inside the molds, tiny curd pieces are pushed closer together. They stick to each other, forming one solid mass. Proper pressing is crucial. If curds aren't pressed enough, you'll end up with cheese that's too soft and moist. It might taste okay, but it won't have that perfect texture we love. Pressing also affects flavor development. As whey is squeezed out, flavors in the curds concentrate. This is why aged pressed cheeses often have more intense, nuanced flavors than their younger counterparts. Some cheesemakers add calcium chloride during pressing to help make the curds denser. Pressing time varies by cheese type. Softer cheeses might only need a few hours, while harder cheeses could be under pressure for days. It's all about achieving the right moisture content and texture for each variety. Modern cheesemaking uses hydraulic presses that apply precise pressure at the push of a button. Back in the old days, cheesemakers used to stack heavy rocks on top of their cheese molds to press them. But even with this technology, cheesemaking remains an art. Experienced cheesemakers use their judgment to know when the cheese is pressed just right. As pressing ends, the cheese takes on its familiar shape. It's firming up, getting denser, and starting to look like something you'd want to slice. But our cheese journey isn't over yet. There's still more to come. Let's check out the brining room. See those huge tanks filled with salty water? That's where our cheese is headed next. The workers are carefully lowering the cheese blocks into the brine. It's like watching a cheese submarine dive into the salty sea. Now, you might be wondering why we're dunking our precious cheese in salt water. Salt is like the conductor in the orchestra of cheese flavors, bringing out the best in every note. It's not just about taste. Salt plays a crucial role in shaping the cheese's texture, preserving it, and protecting it from harmful bacteria. The brining process is all about balance. Some cheeses might only need a few hours in the brine, while others could be soaking for days. As the salt moves into the cheese, it pushes out extra moisture, making the cheese firmer and giving it that perfect texture we all love. But brining isn't the only way to add salt to cheese. Some cheesemakers use dry salting, where they rub salt directly onto the cheese's surface. This method can create a different texture and flavor profile compared to brining. Dry salting often results in a more concentrated salty flavor on the outside of the cheese, while brining allows for a more even salt distribution throughout. Salt has been a cheesemaker's best friend for thousands of years. Long before refrigeration, people discovered that salt could keep cheese from spoiling. It creates an environment where harmful bacteria can't thrive, acting like a natural preservative. The cheesemakers have to be super careful about how long they leave each cheese in the brine. Leave it too long, and you might end up with cheese that's way too salty, not long enough, and the cheese might not develop the right flavor or texture. It's a real balancing act. As the cheese soaks, you can actually see it changing. The outside starts to get a bit firmer and takes on a slightly different color. It's like watching the cheese grow up right before your eyes. After its salty bath, the cheese isn't done yet. The workers carefully lift it out of the brine and let it drip dry. Even after the cheese is out of the brine, the salt keeps slowly moving through it, evening out and continuing to develop that perfect flavor and texture. At this point, our cheese is starting to look and feel a lot more like the cheese you'd find in your local store. It's got that slightly firm outside and that perfect salty taste. But don't get too excited yet. We've still got a way to go before this cheese is ready for your cheese board. Our cheese is almost ready, but there's one last surprise in store. Let's step into the cheese aging room, or as some like to call it, the cheese cave. Look at all these shelves lined with cheese wheels and blocks. It's like a nursery for cheese, where each wheel grows and develops its own personality. Some cheeses will stay here for weeks, while others might hang out for months or even years. The temperature and humidity are carefully controlled, creating the perfect environment for our cheese to mature. Inside each wheel, there's a whole party happening. Tiny bacteria and enzymes are hard at work, slowly breaking down proteins and fats. This creates complex flavor compounds like esters, which give fruity notes, and ketones responsible for that buttery taste we love. It's like the cheese is learning new flavors as it grows up. See that Parmesan wheel over there? It's been aging for over a year. All that time allows flavors to develop and intensify. The proteins break down into amino acids, creating those crunchy crystals you find in aged cheeses. It's like the cheese is gaining wisdom with age. Not all cheeses age the same way. Look at those blue cheeses with their distinctive veins. Cheesemakers poke holes in them to let air in, allowing special molds to grow. It's like giving the cheese room to breathe and express itself. As cheese ages, it loses moisture, which can make it harder and more crumbly. But the breakdown of proteins can also make it creamier. It's a delicate balance, just like managing a teenager's mood swings. The aging process greatly affects the price and market value of cheese. The longer a cheese ages, the more expensive it becomes due to the time, space, and care involved. It's like paying for your cheese's college education. It's an investment in its future flavor. As cheese ages, it becomes more digestible. The bacteria break down some of the proteins and fats, making them easier for our bodies to process. It's like the cheese is preparing itself to be the best it can be for us. Let's talk about something surprising in a cheese factory: color. Some cheeses are yellow, others are white. But here's the interesting part: it's not always natural. Cheesemakers sometimes add a natural coloring called annatto to their cheese. It's like giving the cheese a sun-kissed glow. But why do this? Well, it turns out people have strong feelings about cheese color. Many folks think yellow cheese tastes better, even though color doesn't affect taste at all. The history behind this is pretty cool. In the past, people noticed cheese looked different depending on the season. Spring and summer cheese was yellower because cows ate fresh grass. Fall and winter cheese was whiter due to hay diets. People thought the yellower cheese was better, so cheesemakers started adding color to make all their cheese look like summer cheese. Even today, with all our knowledge about cheese, people still prefer yellow varieties. It's like our brains are playing a trick on us. We see yellow and think, that must be delicious. Different cheeses have different traditional colors. Cheddar, usually yellow, Parmesan, typically white. It's like an unwritten rule in the cheese world. But here's a fun fact. In some places, they prefer white cheddar. Same cheese, just without the coloring. Adding color to cheese is a bit like choosing what to wear. Just as we pick clothes to make a good impression, cheesemakers choose colors to appeal to customers. It's all about meeting expectations and catching the eye on store shelves. The coloring process is subtle. They add just a tiny bit of annatto to get that perfect golden hue. It's completely safe and has been used for centuries in various foods. If we look at the milk they're using to make cheese today, it's kind of off-white. That's because it's fall now, and the cows aren't eating as much fresh grass. But by the time it becomes cheese, it'll have that nice yellow color we all expect. Cheesemakers are not just making cheese. They're also making sure it looks the way we expect it to. It's like they're food scientists and artists all rolled into one. They're giving customers what they want, because after all, cheese making is a business. Now that you know this secret, you might look at cheese differently. Some yellow cheeses started out white and got a little help to look the way they do. But remember, whether it's yellow or white, it's still delicious cheese. The color might fool our eyes, but our taste buds know what's good. Wow, what a journey we've been on. From special milk to aging caves, cheese making is full of surprises. Let's recap. Carefully selected milk, curds and whey, pressing, salting, and aging to perfection. Cheese production is booming, with about 20 million tons made yearly. But there's also growing interest in artisanal cheeses. People want unique flavors and traditional methods, curious about their food's origins. Why not try a new cheese today? There's a world of flavors waiting. As you taste, think about its journey from milk to plate. What's next for cheese making? Will technology change things? Or will traditional methods stay strong? The future of cheese is in your hands, or rather, on your plate.